I love a donut. A cider donut is so good. Honestly, every single time I've made this recipe, I've made a different number. I started with 8, and I feel like now the dough makes almost like 16 sometimes. Cheers.
Cheers. Whoa.
Hey everyone, I'm Nea with the Food52 Test Kitchen, and today I'm going to teach you how to make apple cider 5-spice crullers. It's kind of like a cross between one of my favorite fall treats, an apple cider donut, which I'm sure most people can agree are super good, and a classic French cruller. So we're going to start off by actually reducing the apple cider. So I have 2 cups here. This does take a little bit of time, probably like 5 to 10 minutes. So if you want to skip that step, it's totally fine. You could just use 1 cup instead. So when you've noticed that it's reduced to about half of what you started with, that's when you know it's done. And the reason I did this is to really concentrate that apple cider flavor. Again, you don't have to do it. It's not super necessary. I just think it kind of like elevated it a little bit. Okay, so now that it's boiling, I'm gonna add a little bit of butter. I recipe tested this recipe so many times. Honestly, it's been a journey. I started with only, oops, this is like very soft. I wasn't expecting it to be that soft. I started with only 1/4 of a cup of butter, so a half stick, thinking that I wouldn't need it, but I think increasing it to a whole stick definitely really helped. You don't have to let it melt before you add the sugar. So a little bit of sugar, just about a tablespoon. And then I'm also gonna add about 3/4 of a teaspoon kosher salt. The sugar isn't super necessary because the apple cider is already pretty sweet, especially if you boil it down. I like it. I think it just makes them a little bit crispier on the inside. I want to say that's my own opinion. So you don't have to actually let this simmer at all. You're really just looking for the butter to melt. And the thing with crullers, this is based off of like a French cruller, which is basically just the same type of dough as you would use for like a cream puff. I wanted to say puff pastry, but so yeah, so really if you don't want to fry these, you could even bake them too, which is kind of cool. So actually before I add the flour, I have a little bit of all-purpose flour here. I'm gonna add a little bit of cinnamon. This is just about 1/4 of a teaspoon, so it's not gonna be too overpowering, but I do really want those like warm apple cider, apple-y flavors to shine through. And then I also have Chinese 5-spice. Might sound like a weird spice to add, but I think it goes really well with the cinnamon and everything else that we're doing with it. And I actually decided to use Chinese 5-spice because a few years ago I used to work at this company called Martha Stewart and Marley Spoon, and one of the recipe developers there made these really amazing cookies. They were, I think they were dulce de leche cookies with Chinese 5-spice, and they were so good. And when I was trying to think of a way to make these a little more fun and different, I remembered that recipe and decided to add it, and it actually tastes really good. So with the heat on low, I'm gonna add the flour and the spices, and now I'm gonna mix with you can use a spatula or a wooden spoon, and you wanna kind of mix vigorously so that all the flour clumps kind of disappear, and so that the flour kind of cooks and starts to smell nutty. But what you're looking for is for the mixture to kind of leave a little film on the bottom of the saucepan. So by the time you're done, it's gonna look a little bit like Play-Doh, almost. So now I'm gonna mix in the eggs, and it's kind of important to let this cool down a little bit, because if you add the eggs straight into the pot or mix them immediately, the heat from the dough is gonna kind of cook the eggs, and then you're gonna end up with like a scrambled egg, and you don't want that. So what I do to let it cool down pretty quickly is just add it to the bowl of the stand mixer, and then I like to just spread it out along the sides like this. And this helps to just, I don't know, there's more surface area, and then there's just like, it's not just in one clump. And you don't have to let it completely cool down, but I like to just let it sit for maybe like 5 minutes or so. You could definitely make this without a stand mixer. You could either do by hand, which you're gonna end up like having such a serious arm workout. You could do it with a wooden spoon, I'd recommend. Or you can also use a handheld electric mixer. That will probably be a lot faster than doing it by hand. I like to use a paddle like this. You could probably use a whisk attachment, but you also don't want to over mix it. And for this recipe, I'm using 4 eggs. This type of dough can be a little bit finicky, and I feel like I struggled with this when I was developing it. I started with 4 eggs, and it was a little too loose. Then I used 3 eggs, and it was a little too thick. So For this recipe, I am using 4 whole eggs and then 1 egg white. And it's really important to mix until the egg is completely combined before you add another egg, just in case. And just to make sure that it's like turns into a nice smooth dough pretty quickly. Just gonna go in and scrape down the sides. I'm gonna add another egg. And the amount of egg might depend too on like the environment you're in. So if you are in an environment that's too humid or too dry, or also the type of flour you use. So you might actually end up having to use all 5 eggs. And at first, when you add the egg, the mixture is gonna look a little bit clumpy and a little curdled, but you just have to trust the process. And after mixing for a little bit, it's gonna turn into a dough. So it's already kind of like mixed together. All right, I'm actually just gonna add the rest, or the remaining 2. Okay, I'm gonna scrape down the sides. It's looking like a little loose. Actually, just kidding. Make sure if you're using a stand mixer like this, make sure you're getting all the way down into the bottom of the bowl, because these mixers or these bowls have little kind of like donuts in the bottom that kind of catch a lot of the dough, and the dough doesn't get all the way down there. Sometimes you need more liquid, sometimes you need less. So one test you can do is the V test. So you kind of pull the mixer up from the bottom of the bowl, and then you want it to kind of drape in like a V from the paddle. This is a little bit too thick. I want it to be kind of falling off a little bit more than it is. So I'm gonna add that extra egg white. And that's one thing that I didn't realize until I did some like research about crullers and how to make a good cruller. I was just adding, I think I was adding 3 eggs total, and I was thinking that this was fine. I thought it looked good. I thought that the dough was supposed to be on the thicker side. But what happened then is when I actually went to fry them, they puffed up really nicely, they browned really well, they were really crispy, but the inside was so dense. And I tried to see if like cooking them at a higher temperature or for longer worked, but that just made them a little oily and also kind of made them collapse in the middle too. So I think that you'd rather have the dough be a little too loose than too dense, because you're gonna have a dense cruller. So let's do a little test. It actually looks really good. It might be on like slightly the too loose side, because you see it's dripping a little bit more than maybe I'd like it, but that's okay because we're gonna chill it in the fridge for about an hour or so, and it's gonna set a little bit more, and it's still gonna be really easy to work with. I'm gonna take this off the mixer, and I'm gonna scrape down everything from the sides of the bowl, because I'm gonna cover everything in plastic wrap too. All right, I prepped a little piece of plastic wrap. So instead of just putting this right over the bowl like this, I'm gonna place it down. This is kind of hard. I feel like it sticks to the sides a lot. So I'm gonna place it down directly onto the dough and I'm gonna try to like really get it like on the whole surface. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna prevent like a weird film / skin from forming on top, which can sometimes be kind of hard to mix in if you have it already, but it's also not the end of the world. So yeah, I'm gonna chill this for a few hours. You could also make this a day in advance too. Some people say that you should chill it for up to 24 hours. So yeah, it's a good make-ahead thing to do too. Okay, so it's chilled a little bit. Let me show you. You can see that the color kind of got a little bit paler, and it's also looking a lot more stiff than it was before I chilled it. This is my favorite step, the piping. So I'm first gonna cut this piece of parchment paper into little squares, because we're gonna pipe the dough onto the squares. It's kind of like an easy way to lower the actual cruller into the oil. So I'm cutting about 2 by 2 inch or 3 by 3 inch maybe. Doesn't really matter, but you'll need about like 15 or so. So now to actually pipe them, I have just a regular piping bag, and then I have a large star tip. I would say this is like I don't know what number this is. I know they all have specific like names and numbers, but this is probably like a 1/2 inch, I want to say. So now I'm just gonna add all our cruller dough to this pastry bag. And if you have one that's on the smaller side, you can also do it in batches. I feel like this is one of those things that I don't think you should swap. I feel like sometimes when you're piping frosting or other things, you could use a Ziploc bag, but I think it would be really hard to add a piping tip to a Ziploc bag and not have it like leak out. I also actually tried making little donut holes with this batter. So I used like a tablespoon cookie scoop, and I just scooped the dough into the oil. So you could always do that too and make little like cruller donut balls. One thing that you can do, I don't always do it just because I'm like a little lazy, but you could take some of the dough and place it on the bottom of your baking sheet and then put the little square of dough there, and then it holds it in place when you go to pipe. I don't even have to hold it in place, so I can just pipe a nice 3-ish inch circle. It's pretty firm and it's holding its shape really well. So that's why it's important to chill the dough. I love like a make ahead recipe, so I'm just gonna point out that you could also do this in advance. So you could, instead of chilling, well, no, you should probably chill it first, but after your first chill, you could pipe them out and then you could store them in the fridge like this until you're ready to not freeze them, fry them. The last one is always the hardest to get out because you kind of have to squeeze down like through the piping tip, but okay, it's not gonna be as pretty. It's not gonna be as pretty, but it's fine. It'll still taste good. So now it's time to fry. A heavy bottomed pot of oil here, and I'm just using vegetable oil, and you only need about 2 inches like of oil in it. So this is, yeah, it's like 360, so that's perfect. And one way, if you don't have a kitchen thermometer, you can actually use the back of a wooden spoon, which is kind of cool. So you can dip it in the oil, and you're really looking for the bubbles. So if you see no bubbles or very few bubbles, the oil is not hot enough. If you see like an insane amount of bubbles, it's probably too hot. But if you see kind of like just bubbles surrounding it and it looks like a little fizzy, then you should be good to start frying. So you could definitely use a spider, but I usually just use my hands. Do it carefully though. And so I'm gonna lower them down, cruller facing down with the parchment paper on. So I'm gonna do 3 at a time. And you don't wanna, I mean, this pot probably couldn't fit more than 3 anyway, but even if you had a bigger pot, I wouldn't suggest adding more than 2 or 3 because you don't want the temperature of the oil to go down, and when you're frying something, that's just what's gonna happen. Probably like 25 seconds have already gone or maybe more, but you're gonna fry them with the parchment paper on for at least a minute, and then we're gonna take the parchment paper off. I think it just makes it a lot easier to add the cruller in, but you can definitely, and you should definitely fry it with the parchment paper on. Now I'm gonna take the parchment paper off, and it kind of does like to stick to the cruller, so don't do too fast. You also don't want any of the oil to splatter up on you. You kind of just want to like wiggle it off almost. Now I'm going to flip them over, and I am going to let them fry for another 2 minutes, and then I'm going to flip them over again and let them fry for another 2 minutes too. Kind of have to go by judgment. But as long as the oil isn't too hot or too cool and they look really nice and deep brown, they should be cooked through. I like to always go a little longer than I maybe think, just to be on the safe side, because there's nothing worse than a really dense donut. I'm gonna make the sugar that we're gonna dip them in. So I have about a 1/2 cup of white sugar, and then I'm gonna add a little bit more cinnamon and also a little bit more Chinese 5 spice. Really, the main reason I'm doing a sugar instead of a glaze is because I think it's just a lot easier, I think. But I also like that I'm able to add more Chinese 5 spice to this and have that flavor really shine through. You could definitely just turn this into a glaze as well if you want to do. The thing that becomes tricky though when you're making a glaze with spices is that it will just, I don't know, the color just won't be as nice. So it's gonna, because the spices aren't gonna dissolve in the milk or the liquid that you're adding, it's gonna be kind of like a weird speckled brown color, and I don't know. If you don't mind it, definitely do it. I just wanted to go this way. Just make sure if you're using tongs, don't crush them. And you can let them dry on a cooling rack if you want. I like to put them on a paper towel just to absorb any extra oil. And before I add them to the sugar, I'm gonna add a few more crullers. I love a donut. A cider donut is so good. And the bottom is just naturally not gonna look as good as the top, but that's okay. You're only gonna see one side anyway. So I'm gonna add it to the sugar, and sometimes I like to use a really big bowl and you can kind of like toss it around, but a small bowl works fine too. I'm just gonna keep flipping it until it's nice and covered like that. The 5 spice is so fragrant. It smells really good. Okay, wait, we're done. Just one more to sugar. Brian's gonna come try cruller.
Yeah, all right.
Have you had an apple cider donut before?
I have.
Have you had a cruller before?
Have I had a childhood is basically what you're asking? Yes, I've had a childhood.
All right, well, have you had an apple cider cruller
No, I
before?
haven't.
All right.
That would be new. Which one should I take? Different colors.
Take, I feel like that one's, or this
Okay.
one, take that one.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
I'll take this one. I hope that they are cooked through well.
Here we go.
Cheers.
Cheers. Whoa.
I love Brian's
Did you
woes.
fill this with anything?
No.
I realize that's how I respond to anything that's good. It's like, whoa.
Whoa. That's
This is
fair.
good. This
Thanks.
is great.
They're a little bit like, they're a little doughier, I think, than I like would have wanted them to be. Like yesterday when I did my final test, they were super like crispy and airy, but these are actually, I don't know, I kind of like it. I feel like gives it a little more flavor.
Oh, I kind of like it like that though.
Thank you for coming to taste. If you guys want to make this recipe, you can find it down below in the description. I would love to hear what you guys think if you make it, and also would love to hear if you have any suggestions on things that you want to see. So yeah, we'll see you in the next video.